After about 3 years of keeping a Lake Malawi African cichlid tank, I finally have it to a spot where it's peaceful just about all the time. So what am I doing to keep these guys from killing each other? Absolutely nothing. Except for these 5 things, and a bonus if you can stick around to the end. Now I know what you're thinking. This guy says he has a peaceful African cichlid tank. There's no way.
He's lying.
Well, I'm not lying, and I've had a peaceful tank for at least 6 months, maybe more than that. And I'm not saying that there's no aggression in the tank at all, like these guys are just angels all the time, because there are some skirmishes here and there where one fish will chase another one, but it's not super aggressive. I'm not getting damaged fins, damaged eyes, fish aren't corralled all over to one side of the tank, and that's important to me. I want to have as peaceful a tank as I can. And I've been doing these tips, and I think that they have helped. Many of them came from viewers like you, so if you have other suggestions, make sure you leave them in the comments. People do read those, and we all benefit from them. And I'm not saying that if you use these tips, your problems are all gonna go away, because you just never know with these nut jobs. However, if you use them, they could help, and I'm saving the best one, what I think is the best one, for last. These guys like their water pretty warm. We're talking like the 74 to 82 degree Fahrenheit range. And if you have males and females in the tank, if you keep it the higher end of that range, it actually helps increase their desire for each other, and they start spawning and having babies. But you know what? Alcatraz doesn't have a single female in the tank. It's all males. And quite frankly, I don't give a shit what they want.
Maybe I care a little bit. I mean, I'm not going to set the temp at 70 degrees and let them freeze. But a viewer once commented that he had pretty good luck with dropping the temp a few degrees and letting their psychopath Africans chill a little bit. Just a degree or two can make a big difference. I use Inkbird 106A controllers, which are wonderful if you don't have a controller yet, and they're pretty inexpensive. If your heaters ever fail in the on position and they never turn off, these controllers will keep your fish from cooking to death. And I use 2 heaters just in case one fails and won't turn on. That way the tank will still have 1 heater running while I'll install a backup that I keep on hand for special occasions like this. Well, I was setting the temp on my controller for Alcatraz at 81 degrees because I heard that first of all they like it warmer, but also it might make them color up a bit more with the higher temp. 81 is really at the high end of that temperature range I was talking about, so I had lots of room to drop the temp and see what happened. I dropped it just a couple of degrees to 79. So the heaters turn off at 79 and then back on once the tank hits 78. And you know what? They do seem to have better manners with the water a little on the cooler side. I could even drop it to 78, but right now there's no need. So if you're having trouble with aggression in your African cichlid tank, maybe you could play with your temperature range some and see if it helps your psychopaths turn into gentlemen psychopaths. I'm doing it, and I'll never go warm again.
I know you've heard the phrase, bigger is better, and it applies to all kinds of things, but it also applies to fish tanks. I'm going to tell you what kind of living conditions my fish are in right now, the tank size and dimensions, and then also the stocking level, because I stock my fish differently than most African cichlid keepers do, and it's working.
You will subscribe. Ding ding.
Alcatraz is pretty big. This acrylic tank is 8 feet long by 2 feet deep by 2 feet high. And this is the perfect minimum tank size for some of the fish I have in here, in my opinion. Take Ferk the second, for example, my biggest fish. He'll top out around the 10 to 16 inch range, and hopefully he doesn't get much bigger than 12, because 16 inches would just be too big for a tank this size. I know it would work, so don't start yelling at me in the comments. I just wouldn't feel good about it. I don't want him to feel cramped. Some others in here will probably get on the larger side too, like over 10 inches, and I think 8 feet in length is helping them to feel less edgy. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I go above and beyond the minimum suggested tank size for my fish. That's why I think if you're keeping peacocks and haps, and I'm not talking about Tanganyikans or Mbuna now, I think you'll have better luck with aggression and overall happiness of your fish with at least a 125 instead of the suggested 55 or 75 gallon tanks. I'd go with at least a 180 if you have 10 inches or larger. They love open swimming space, so the more of it you can give them, the less likely they are to give someone the shiv in the middle of the night. If you had to be locked up with a deranged killer, would you rather be locked up in a small room or in a huge house? Of course, either way you're gonna die, but you'd choose the house, right? Maybe that was a bad example since either way you're dead, but you get the point. I also don't overstock my fish. You can see that there's plenty of room in here to add more fish, even when some of these guys fully mature around the 10 to 12 inch range. And the reason I'm making this video is to give you some ideas about what I'm doing that could be responsible for this inexplicable peace in Alcatraz when it's full of crazy nut jobs who by design just want to kill each other and dine on delicious food, of course. So you can see that you don't have to cram as many of these fish as possible into your small glass box in order for them to get along, like some people say. That method can work too, but I'm not a fan of it, and if you don't want to go that route with your tank, then you by no means have to. Just look at how happy these guys are. They love their little prison yard, and why wouldn't they?
I've always been really big on feeding my fish good quality food, and that's why I feed them North Fin pellets, and then once a week I'll give them some frozen raw shrimp and some zucchini as a treat. But I never really thought too much about when I'm feeding them, just what I was feeding them. And then I had a viewer comment once saying that maybe I should mix that up a little bit. And I did, and I noticed a big difference in the aggression level in the tank.
I used to feed him a heaping spoonful of North Fin cichlid pellets once a day in the evening. At the time, I had a viewer comment on mixing that up, and I was having some aggression problems in the tank. He suggested that I don't just feed him once a day, but give him something to munch on a few times a day. So I started giving them a smaller amount in the morning, something to take the edge off. Let them know there's still food in the house. No need to kill anyone and eat their body like those football players had to do in the Andes. Society of the Snow is a great Netflix original, by the way, if you haven't seen it yet. Then I give them a larger portion in the evening. I'm keeping an eye on them to make sure that they aren't getting fat. You don't want your Africans to get fat, because they will if you feed them too much. They never know when to stop gorging because they're gluttonous bastards, so you have to control it for them. I never feed them more than they can eat in about 30 seconds. I did notice that they seem less nut jobby since I started feeding them twice a day. So give it a try and see if it changes the mood in your African cichlid tank. Or don't, it's up to you. My inmates are happy that their daddy loves them enough to feed them twice a day though. Just saying.
If you just look at Alcatraz, you may think it's boring. I mean, it just has a few fake rocks in it, some pipes from Petco, and some black plants that I ordered online from Etsy. I mean, there's really not much in there, and it could be boring to a lot of people. But it kind of has to be that way. And if you want something different and you want to be able to escape your tank, then you might try a different species. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I have my 435-gallon tank over here for my American cichlids. I wanted to be able to escape it pretty much how I wanted to. Of course, I can't put real-life plants in there because they'll get eaten, but you know what I mean. This tank is going to be a lot more limited, and there's a reason for that.
Since I already brought it up, let's take a look at San Quentin for a minute, my 10-footer. Man, I love this tank. It's everything I ever wanted. Say hi to Percy, my wild Colombian Oscar. You can see the escaping video for this huge tank in the upper right corner, by the way. But back to Alcatraz. Maybe a little on the boring side, but I think it's helping to keep the tempers from flaring. They tend to attach themselves to property in the tank, so you have to be careful. These rocks could cause some real problems if they started claiming territory, but they really haven't done that. If they're going to claim space, it's usually in the far back corner of either side of the tank. I don't have a lot of stuff in here for them to claim, and I could always take out more of what I do have if the aggression levels start to rise. And the smaller the tank, the more your decor could cause some issues too. So be careful of what you're placing in your tank if it's on the smaller side. So this is how I'm decorating Alcatraz, and so far it's working, and no one in here likes my decor so much that they want everyone else to die for it.
You merely adopted the darkness. I was born in it. If you can tell me what movie that's from, you get bonus points today. So let's talk about lighting in Alcatraz. So lighting for your fish tanks is just for you. I mean, most of us know that. They don't need additional light than the ambient light that comes through the windows or lights on in the house. It's just for us so we can see them. But we have these beautiful fish. I mean, African cichlids are some of the most beautiful freshwater fish you can get. So we want to be able to see them. We have to have light. But I'm going to tell you my strategy for lighting Alcatraz, which I think has contributed to the peace that's going on in the tank.
These fish do get more aggressive when there's more light to see each other with. They're like, "Oh shit, you again. I thought I killed you this morning.
Now I have to do it again."
So I'm strategic when I add light to the tank for my viewing pleasure. I pretty much keep the light on in the evening when I'm home to watch them. I leave it on for 4 hours. I'm not just sitting there in front of the tank for 4 hours. I'm not that weird, but I'm still pretty weird. But I do like to walk by the tank and see them on my way to the kitchen or as I'm watching TV or whatever. I think having it fairly dark for the rest of the time has worked out pretty well in keeping the aggression level manageable.
Something else about lighting that you may have noticed in my videos is that I don't use a full light strip that covers the entire length of the tank. I'll leave a few feet on each end. So I have an 8-foot tank right now, and I normally would have a 4-foot section of light and a 2-foot section. And that gives a foot on each end of the tank where there's some light fall off, some darkness where the fish can go and hide out. That way, if there is some mild aggression going on, or even heavy aggression, which I haven't had for a while, it'll give them a place to hide. I think that helps them deal with aggression and maybe even keep the peace in the tank.
Plus, I like the way the vignette looks at my tanks, light heavy in the middle with that gentle fall off on the ends. I like it, the fish like it, but maybe you don't. So it's just an idea, and I think it works.
If you've made it this far in the video, I don't know how you did it, but you did, so here's your bonus. So if you look at Alcatraz, I have some beautiful fish in there, and there are a lot of the fish that I wanted to have in the tank. But I can tell you that there are a lot of other African cichlids that I wanted in Alcatraz that'll never be in it.
I'd love to have an eye biter in Alcatraz. Absolutely. But he's one of the fish I've blacklisted. You might get a good one, but from my research, you'll probably wind up with a killer. If I had an even bigger tank for my Africans, like maybe the size of San Quentin, I'd consider giving it a go, but not now. I do have a Strigatus in here that highly resembles an eye biter. These guys are typically less aggressive than eye biters, but they still have a bad reputation. I took a chance since my last one was great, but this one is more aggressive than I'd like. Fortunately, not for him but for everyone else in the tank, he has a damaged eye that impedes his ability to lay forth the beatings for the day. He's pretty much been rendered harmless, since he can't see where the hell everyone went once they cross over to his right side. Perhaps you're confused. I'm not saying poke your jerkfish in the eye if they're acting up. Just be careful and do your research before you add your fish. I think it's much more about the right balance in the tank rather than the number of fish you have, or really any of the other things I've mentioned so far about what I'm doing with Alcatraz. Selecting your fish with an end goal in mind of how these fish will get along in the long run is pretty helpful. They will always show some aggression at some point, but they shouldn't be corralling everyone to one side of the tank regularly or causing damage to other fish. Small chases that end quickly are always expected with these wackos. Although any single species of African cichlids can turn out to be nightmares, you have to be ready for it.
In all my wisdom, I've also decided to let go of the idea that peacocks can be good-natured fish. They are the devil himself. Okay, there are a few good ones like the flametail. You may have noticed that the fish in Alcatraz all look like haps, and that's because they are, except for this guy who might be half peacock. He's my whoops baby from an OB and some chick I have no idea what she was, because she came from a terrible online seller. You can keep peacocks if you want to, but I'm over it. So what are you doing to keep peace in your tanks? It doesn't have to be an African cichlid tank, any tank at all. Let us know in the comments. Be sure to subscribe if you want to get updates on all my tanks in the future. Until next time, that's a wrap.